Hi y'all. You ever had one of those books that just so much went so right and so much went so wrong? I have. So Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I had this book on my Amazon wish list for a while and it went on sale. The Kindle version went on sale for $1.99, and so I went ahead and bought it. Many years ago I saw the movie and I was enthralled by the movie. There was so much going on and I could tell it was going to be one of those movies that I could watch many, many times over and still find new things. And I love those sorts of movies, so I wanted to pick up the book, so I put it on my wish list. I read the book. So the main thing that sets this book apart is its structure. It's, in actuality, 6 novellas that are loosely connected and put into one novel. And each of the 6 stories are set in different periods of time, and they're all pretty simple stories. There's nothing really exceptional about any of them. But the theme or the overall idea going through is that each previous story affects the next in some way. And there's a theme of reincarnation, of a soul having a point of each, of a soul being reincarnated from one life to the next. And it's supposed to be the story of this human soul going through, but not just one human soul. We don't stick with the same protagonist. I think it might have been a little more interesting if we'd had a single soul being reincarnated and we got to see the different lives thereof. That's actually a point that's easier to follow in the movie because they have the same actor following the same soul, and that works as a bit of visual storytelling. Now, from a technical standpoint, I am in absolute awe of this book because each of the 6 stories is told in a different genre. It follows the same tropes and cliches of each of those genres. We've got contemporary romance, we've got slapstick comedy.
Bloody sporran!
We've got a thriller in there, we've got post-apocalyptic, we've got a futuristic science fiction. There's a lot going on and it's very well done. And in particular, the writing, it really feels like, I would not be surprised if someone had told me that these were 6 different stories written by 6 different authors who then all collaborated and tried to get them to work together. But knowing that this was one author is really impressive because it's an entirely different style of writing for each story. This book is a labor of love, and that comes through very strongly. A lot of passion went into this book. And the author clearly has a love of language, not only of on the page language, but language through history. And each period feels very true to that period, whether that's the style in the 1800s or we're dealing with a very distant post-apocalyptic future where the English language has evolved and we're dealing with different dialects and different idioms. In the science fiction future, which is the timeline immediately after our own, or the next one in the sequence immediately after our own contemporary, they don't watch videos anymore, they watch Disney's. And it's just these little bits of detail that I really appreciated, and I loved all of those little details all throughout the book. The author has a very clear love of language, and that came through strongly. Now, that being said, as stylized as this was, and as much as I love the concept and much of the execution of this, the last timeline, the post-apocalyptic future, language has evolved so much and the dialect has changed so much, it becomes almost unreadable on the page. and it gets to the point where so much of your concentration is trying to figure out what they're saying, just what they're saying, that it's no longer an enjoyable read. It's something you're really having to work for just to understand what's going on, because it is so distant from native English. So in that way, I think it went too far, even though I liked most of it. My main problem with the book is that for a work that is dealing so much with humanity and the human soul specifically, the novel decidedly lacks one. Particularly in the second half, it becomes very heavy-handed and very elitist, preachy. You've got these 6 stories, and in each of these 6 stories, you're dealing with a generalized theme of there's always going to be people who want to exploit others for their own selfish desires. And then there's always going to be people who want to defend others against exploitation. But it's delivering it in a way where the book seems to think that this is a big revelation and not a standard storytelling thing.
Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others, past and present. And by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future.
It so tries to force feed the reader these answers about humanity and these discoveries about humanity in just some of the most condescending ways possible. It does not trust the reader to come to their own conclusions about some of the things going on. So economics is a theme that is talked about in several of the storylines. In the 1800s storyline, you're dealing with some missionaries who are getting the natives addicted to tobacco in order to force them to work and give them money so they can buy tobacco, and, you know, all for the greater good, because, you know, idle hands do the devil's work or whatever. And then we go to a futuristic society where monopolies have taken over the world, and it's only this really tiny small segment that's insulated from all the horrors of how it's supported. The book does not trust you to come to your own conclusions about these things. Rather than simply exploring this aspect of human nature, it decides that it already knows the answer. And I so wanted to love this book and to have it be an honest exploration and just see where it would take you. But it already knew where it was going to take you. And,
no matter what you do, it will never amount to anything more than a single drop in a limitless ocean.
What is an ocean but a multitude of drops?
And it's not that it was necessarily wrong. It's just that instead of an honest exploration, what we get is an arrow sign. You know, instead of saying, here's what we got and come to your own conclusions and let's just think about this and talk about this. Instead we have, yeah, there you go, there's the answer. And that's where it fell short of greatness, in my opinion. It could have been so much more. So much more. And ultimately, it was just disappointing, is the best word I can describe it with. But absolutely, no exaggeration, this was some of the best technical structure that I've seen, as far as the different voices in the writing and trying to link all of these together. These were 6 very simple stories. The characters I all enjoyed, though. The characters all felt real. A lot of passion and a lot of good writing went into this. I read a lot of reviews saying that it follows this piece of music, which is the Cloud Atlas music that one of the timelines was writing. And that shows up a lot. I'm not sure, unless I'm missing something large, and that's not out of the question. There's a lot of threads in this book. And like I said, one of the main storylines, it was barely legible to me. But I didn't get the impression it was so much following this particular line of music. Much like the Russian dolls, this was just, the music was another metaphor to try to point out to you how all these stories were linked, just in case you weren't getting the point on your own.
Just trying to understand why we keep making the same mistakes over and over.
I'll read you an example of this. The book doesn't trust you to understand a lot of what's going on. So this is the protagonist who is writing the Cloud Atlas. Sexlet of overlapping soloists. This is at 87%. I don't know what page. Piano, clarinet, cello, flute, oboe, and violin, each in its own language of key, scale, and color. In the first set, each solo is interrupted by its successor. In the second, each interruption is recontinued in order. Revolutionary or gimmicky? Shan't know until it's finished, but by then it'll be too late. But it's the first thing I think of when I wake and the last thing I think of before I fall asleep. And that's the structure of the book. The music is just being shown as another sort of metaphor for the structure of the book. Which is a nice bit of writing, it is, but there's another one about, nested Russian dolls that it does the same thing with, and it just keeps pointing it out. Like, obviously you're not getting this enough yet, so we're just going to keep pointing it out until, we're absolutely certain that we have beat this horse to death. But yes, for all of the good and all of the bad, and for a good bit of the illegible, I'm giving this book 3 stars. It's an interesting exercise. It's not an easy read. I wouldn't call it an enjoyable read. It's not a beach read. It's something you want to read if you are interested in story structure and you want to see something that's very different and reasonably well executed. But I am glad I read it. I think I just want to see the movie again because the movie grasped me so much more. And I think this might be one of the rare cases where I think the movie was better executed than the book. So that's it from me today. Have you read Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell? And if not, are you interested in reading it now? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear, especially if you have read it and there's something large and glaringly obvious that I'm missing here, which was probably in the last timeline that I couldn't read. Anyway, so talk to me. Love to hear from you. Until then, bye-bye. It's trying to be like this next level woke shit. Distant post-apocalyptic. But, so yeah, talk to me and I'd love to hear from you. And until then, that's all. And I'm just gonna stop talking now. So.